Hi, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie and my fringe currently looks like, I don't know, like a Pippi Longstocking plait, but fringe version. For people who've been here for a while, they might recognise this cardigan as like the Harry Styles cardigan that I was knitting like maybe 2 or 3 Victobers/Octobers ago. I have definitely worn it before. It's actually extremely hot, so I think I'll undo it. Yeah, it's also made of like, I like held pretty chunky yarn double knit, so it's just like extremely heavy and kind of a nightmare to wash, which is one of the reasons why I don't wear it that much, because I made this like quite early on when I was like learning how to knit and stuff. Like you can tell from some of the choices I made, but yeah, it's got these nice different panels. Oh, it's too hot. The day that this video is posted is the day that Virginia Woolf published Jacob's Room in 1922, so 100 years ago today, and I kind of just wanted to like mark that. I think it's like a forgotten book. I think that it's always kind of sidelined by, you know, these like big man modernists, both in terms of their work but also just them as figures within modernism generally, like T.S. Eliot and James Joyce, whose work I think is generally derivative or stolen from their wives, or yeah, just like deeply overrated. So yeah, happy birthday, happy 100th birthday, Jacob's Room. It's kind of wild to think that it's 100 years ago that it was published, because it feels quite, like, I don't know, it feels kind of closer than that, I guess, or at least maybe it's just because I think a lot about like 1920s, early 1900s books and things, but yeah. So Jacob's Room is a novel about Jacob. It's also kind of a novel that grapples with novelness. It's thinking about like containers and fluidity. It's her third novel, because I think Monday or Tuesday, which was published in 1920, is a collection of kind of like short pieces. I do actually have the like 100th anniversary edition of Night and Day, which was published in 1919, so obviously in 2019 that was when that happened. But this copy I have, actually, it says, there's a big typo on the back and it says the 200th anniversary edition, which is really funny. So I don't know if they'll be making like a nice Jacob's Room edition. I haven't kind of checked. Maybe I should. Comparatively though, there is like a big leap in terms of kind of like conventionality in form. This is quite like a sort of Edwardian novel, not least because it's set in the Edwardian era, but also just because of the way that it is written. How it explores what it's engaging with is very kind of like realist novel, basically, and there aren't many departures in kind of form as far as I remember, whereas this is maybe not quite as experimental or kind of yeah, distorting or explosive than other Woolf's works. It still is much less conventional in how it's a novel, and I think you can kind of tell that by the fact that it's called Jacob's Room. Like, it's not Jacob. I only read this once a little while ago, I think last year, the end of last year, and I did really enjoy it. It's definitely not, you know, my favourite, but I do think it's a worthwhile book to read. And also, if you do like Woolf and you have read To the Lighthouse, or if you go on to read The Lighthouse, you'll definitely find some similarities. I was rereading the beginning and I was just so struck by how much like To the Lighthouse it was, and yeah, I think it's nice, kind of. I mean, I do kind of feel like Woolf is often just writing the same novel over and over again throughout her work, and kind of developing in different places, or placing kind of like the focal point in a different spot, like a different pin or something. And yeah, I don't know, that's really enjoyable to kind of explore, because it makes you really feel like you're exploring a landscape of novels, of text. And one more thing I wanted to say, I guess, was just that like the ending for me was one of the like most moving passages that I've read for a while, and I just felt like I was really struck by how incredibly sort of deftly and concisely it manages to like sum up the whole that grief often leaves you with. And then I also think what's interesting is when I was rereading it, when I was rereading a little section of it because I was trying to figure out how I would do this video, I reread the end and then I reread the beginning, and because I did it in that order, I felt like there is this like continuity between those two places, and in a way you could almost read the end and then read into the beginning and read the novel again, or like the beginning is actually responding directly to the end, or the end is actually responding directly to the beginning. It's definitely a novel that I don't know that well, so I'm definitely sure that I will reread it like and then come to kind of interact with it in a different way or figure out new things about it or whatever. I thought what I would do is I would read the opening of Jacob's Room and yeah, encourage you to pick it up if you're interested. So of course, wrote Betty Flanders, pressing her heels rather deeper in the sand. There was nothing for it but to leave. Slowly welling from the point of her gold nib, pale blue ink dissolved the full stop, for there her pen stuck, her eyes fixed, and tears slowly filled them. The entire bay quivered, the lighthouse wobbled, and she had the illusion that the mast of Mr. Connor's little yacht was bending like a wax candle in the sun. She winked quickly. Accidents were awful things. She winked again. The mast was straight, the waves were regular, the lighthouse was upright, but the blot had spread. Nothing for it but to leave, she read. Well, if Jacob doesn't want to play. The shadow of Archer, her eldest son, fell across the notepaper and looked blue on the sand, and she felt chilly. It was the 3rd of September already. If Jacob doesn't want to play, what a horrid blot. It must be getting late. Where is that tiresome little boy? She said. I don't see him. Run and find him. Tell him to come at once. But mercifully, she scribbled, ignoring the full stop, everything seems satisfactorily arranged, packed though we are like herrings in a barrel, and forced to stand the perambulator which the landlady quite naturally won't allow. Such were Betty Flanders' letters to Captain Barfoot, many-paged, tear-stained. Scarborough is 700 miles from Cornwall. Captain Barfoot is in Scarborough. Seabrook is dead. Tears made all the dahlias in her garden undulate in red waves and flashed the glass house in her eyes and spangled the kitchen with bright knives and made Mrs. Jarvis, the rector's wife, think at church, while the hymn tune played and Mrs. Flanders bent low over her little boys' heads, that marriage is a fortress and widows stray solitary in the open fields, picking up stones, gleaning a few golden straws, lonely, unprotected, poor creatures. Mrs. Flanders had been a widow these 2 years. "Jacob! Jacob!" Archer shouted. Scarborough, Mrs. Flanders wrote on the envelope, and dashed a bold line beneath. It was her native town, the hub of the universe. But a stamp? She ferreted in her bag, then held it up, mouth downwards, then fumbled in her lap, also vigorously, that Charles Steele in the Panama hat suspended his paintbrush. Like the antennae of some irritable insect, it positively trembled. Here was that woman moving, actually going to get up, confound her! He struck the canvas, a hasty, violent black dab, for the landscape needed it. It was too pale, greys flowing into lavenders, and one star or a white gull suspended just so, too pale as usual. The critics would say it was too pale, for he was an unknown man exhibiting obscurely, a favourite with his landlady's children, wearing a cross on his watch chain and much gratified if his landladies liked his pictures, which they often did. "Jacob! Jacob!" Archer shouted. Exasperated by the noise, yet loving children, Steele picked nervously at the dark little coils in his palette. I saw your brother, he said, nodding his head as Archer lagged past him, trailing his spade, and scowling at the old gentleman in spectacles. "Over there, by the rock," Steele muttered, with his brush between his teeth, squeezing out raw sienna, and keeping his eyes fixed on Betty Flanders' back. "Jacob! Jacob!" shouted Archer, lagging on after a second. The voice had an extraordinary sadness. Pure from all body, pure from all passion, going out into the world solitary, unanswered, breaking against rocks, so it sounded. Steele frowned, but was pleased by the effect of the black. It was just that note which brought the rest together. Ah, one may learn to paint at 50. There's Titian. And so having found the right tint, up he looked and saw to his horror a cloud over the bay. Mrs. Flanders rose, slapped her coat this side and that to get the sand off, and picked up her black parasol. I think what I'll do is I will actually read you the end too, just the final chapter, which is only like a page, slightly more than a page. But obviously, like, if you don't want to hear that, then you can leave, because this is the end of the video, so like, yeah, thanks for watching. Okay, chapter 14. He left everything just as it was. Bonamy marvelled. Nothing arranged, all his letters strewn about for anyone to read. What did he expect? Did he think he would come back? He mused, standing in the middle of Jacob's room. The 18th century has its distinction. These houses were built, say, 150 years ago. The rooms are shapely, the ceilings high. Over the doorways a rose or a round skull is carved in the wood. Even the panels, painted in raspberry-coloured paint, have their distinction. Bonamy took up a bill for a hunting crop. That seems to be paid, he says. There were Sandra's letters. Mrs. Durrant was taking a party to Greenwich. Lady Roxbiere hoped for the pleasure. Listless is the air in an empty room, just swelling the curtain. The flowers in the jar shift. One fibre in the wicker armchair creaks, though no one sits there. Bonamy crossed to the window. Pickford's van swung down the street. The omnibuses were locked together at Muddy's corner. Engines throbbed, and carters, jamming the brakes down, pulled their horses sharp up. A harsh and unhappy voice cried something unintelligible, and then suddenly all the leaves seemed to raise themselves. "Jacob! Jacob!" cried Bonamy, standing by the window. The leaves sank down again. "Such confusion everywhere!" exclaimed Betty Flanders, bursting open the bedroom door. Bonamy turned away from the window. "What am I to do with these, Mr. Bonamy?" She held out a pair of Jacob's old shoes. Okay, well, I'm glad I got through that without like properly crying, but I think I'm gonna cry now. Let me know your thoughts on Jacob's Room if you read it, if you want to read it, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye!